Around 2009, major Twilight fan by the username of Snow Queen's Ice Dragon created her own story called Masters of the Universe that used the same set of characters from Myers' series, minus the supernatural elements. Bella Swan is now a university student majoring in English literature and is sent to interview the reclusive, mysterious Edward Cullen, a multi-millionaire CEO of his own company. Their meeting was set off into a tale of dark romance where Bella gets a chance of a lifetime to explore her inner desires. As you can imagine, this story got immensely popular on fanfiction.net due to how fast the chapters were pouring out and the positive comments that were left. In time, a small publishing house called the Writer's Coffee Shop will pick up this hot story and instantly make it more attractive through the rise of ebooks. Vintage from Random House got a hold of the story in 2011, started selling paperbacks, and in the blink of an eye became one of the best-selling books of that year, and Snow Queen's Ice Dragon went under a new pen name, E.L. James. Now, here's the summary from the back of the first book. When literature student Anastasia Steele goes to interview young entrepreneur Christian Grey, she encounters a man who is beautiful, brilliant, and intimidating. The unworldly innocent Anna is startled to realize that she wants this man, and despite his enigmatic reserve, finds she is desperate to get close to him. Unable to resist Anna's quiet beauty, wit, and independent spirit, Grey admits he wants her too, but on his own terms. The exact same story as proven by the good people from Dear Author who went through the trouble to find the 89% similarity between the two, with the major changes being character names to avoid copyright. But that shouldn't matter because if it's the same story, surely it remains to be as positive as it was when it first started, right? Well, you might be shocked to hear, but the majority of readers all unionized their thoughts and said that this was the worst unimaginable thing they have ever read in their entire lives. But how could that be? Well, a few things. According to this fine gentleman from Folding Ideas, thank you so much for your sacrifice time. James is well known for picking fights when it comes to criticism and changes to her work. No piece of art is without its fair share of negative reviews, which is why she moderated the hell out of her comments and only kept the ones that gave her praise. She also fired her first official editor who tried to make changes that will make the story a little more coherent. It was easy for her to rein control over the forums, but not the world. The world saw it for what it was, but the damage was already done. This terribly written fanfic earned millions. It even went on to have movie deals on the entire trilogy. And I don't mean to sound like I have something against fanfictions getting recognition, that's not the case at all. Personally, they are the best way for new writers to get started and harness their craft with stories that have inspired them to pick up the pencil or open the Word doc. I've read my share of fanfics, even wrote some in the past, so I got a good eye for what they look like. It's just, why this one? Why was this story the one to represent the idea that fanfic writers can also achieve success when there are countless of other hidden gems or underrated talent that could do so much better? Now you have people that just read this garbage and think, well, if crap like that can get published and there's success, then writing the book can't be that fucking hard then. No, it's not that. Damn it, James! For this review, I have done the unspeakable and read the entire trilogy, back to back to back. It took me a good month and a half to finish, and I'm still wondering how my brain hasn't rotted to mush by the end. During that time, I also forgot that this was originally a Twilight fanfiction, so my entire reading experience was pretty unique since I wasn't trying to compare anything to Twilight, which wouldn't have made much of a difference anyway since I haven't read Twilight. But if this was inspired by that, then I might be better off not reading it for a while. I treated these characters like their own people and allowed my emotions to roam free and take me down this roller coaster to hell. If I had known how fast I was going to hate everything about this series, I probably wouldn't have attached myself too closely to the stories I did. I should have just went in not taking it too seriously.
But when he hits my clitoris, I cry out loudly.
But that was impossible. It's easy to laugh at the writing and make fun of the way she really tries to relate with her audience. But when you take a step back and witness this quote-unquote romance as a whole, there are deeper issues that can't be ignored. If this just stayed a fanfic, I wouldn't have cared. But when the whole world is your audience and you're telling this kind of story, it's damaging. So I'm not holding back. Whatever you heard about this book is most likely true, and I'll do my best to expand and paint a clearer picture of what this book really is about. So, without further ado, let's discuss these 50 Shades. Nothing ever seems bad at the start. I remember how anxious I was for the problems to immediately show up in the very first pages, and I wasn't disappointed. Right off the bat, I could tell how flawed the writing was. And you're probably thinking, well, this is basically porn, Mike. Who the hell watches porn for the story and the way the narrative is paced? We all know what we came for, am I right, ladies? Good point. Sex is the main appeal for erotica, so you're not too focused on how it's written. But even standard erotica novels, you know, the ones that weren't written under a month, know the basics when it comes to storytelling. You have a grasp on the setting, your list of characters that you might enjoy, and an engaging plot. These elements are done so the reader has an easier time following the narrative and don't spend hours questioning the logic in that universe. You only have the first 4.5 pages until Anna meets Christian for the interview, and once that meeting's over, just about every conversation and piece of dialogue that follows would solely be focused on them. Suddenly the world is nothing more than a filler background to support their blossoming love. You meet Anna's best friend Kate within those first 2 chapters, and her character is only explored through Anna's cartoonish reactions and the worst kind of storytelling. Kate is inquisitive. Kate is bossy sometimes. Kate is awesomely tough. The only reason for this is because James doesn't bother wasting the page on people who aren't Christian or Anna. If the supporting characters aren't glamorizing those two, they aren't worth the attention. There were 2 characters in particular James played up, Christian's mom Grace and his personal gynecologist Dr. Green. And you heard me right, he has his own gynecologist to make sure his submissives don't get pregnant during playtime. These 2 were treated like they would become the central focus for the next chapter, but once they're introduced, James either finds some excuse for the characters to leave immediately or just completely cuts into the next scene.
Anna, meet my mother, Dr. Grace Trevelyan-Gray.
You have no idea how delighted I am to meet you.
It's okay, take it. I was just showing mother out.
Excuse me.
And these were the moments that you kind of hope led to something. Like, how does Christian act around his mom, or what kind of conversation would transpire from meeting a gynecologist this early on in the relationship? There's one scene that cracks me up every time I remember it, because it really shows how little she cares about anyone else in this goddamn series. It's the day of the graduation ceremony, and Anna's mom can't make it due to her 4th husband for some reason, so her favorite stepdad, Ray, goes in her place. This was said just as they were greeting each other by the door.
So, Anna, should we head on over?
Oh, Dad, we have half an hour. Would you like some tea? And can you tell me how everyone in Montesano is getting along? How was the drive down? And then it just cuts. Just like that, and so abruptly too. I mean, if you're not even gonna spend time with this conversation, why even bother with the setup? You could just jump straight into a ceremony without this pointless paragraph, and there are a bunch like it. And do you want to hear the real joke of it all? With so much focus on this couple, there is barely anything to them aside from sex. Anna is a blank canvas. Aside from her love of books, she's not a fleshed out character, and it really annoys me just how weak and stupid of a protagonist she is. And before I get hated on, I'm not trying to say that you can't write weak women. Personally, I love reading about strong women, and looking at Anna, my expectations were to witness how this fragile girl was going to change for the better. But as I said, James doesn't have an idea when it comes to storytelling, and one of the most frustrating facts that you have to accept is that there is 0 character development. The way these characters act depend on how James wants the story to go, which makes them forced and out of place. Whatever the puppet master wants, she's going to get. End of story. I'm sure it wasn't intended to make Anna a shallow gold digger, but the writing is so bad that they can't even convey the right message. She complains about all these extravagant gifts given by Christian, but never does anything about them and simply accepts them in the end. This description describes what she looks for in a guy. Someone who can give her trembling knees, heart in her mouth, and butterflies in her belly. The books are filled with vague descriptions like this, giving no specifics to the characters and could literally apply to anyone, such as a guy who can make her breathless just by being in the same room as her. I also take offense that there can be no nice guys in the series unless they are already in a relationship and can't pose as a threat to Christian or Anna. Her oldest friend Jose Rodriguez is the most infamous example from this series. Meeting him and his history with Anna, I have no problems if they were just friends. He could have been a decent candidate for her, but I understand where she's coming from. But James, did you really have to take it a step further and turn him into some drunk asshole just to make Christian fucking Grey look good in comparison? Was that really necessary?
Portland Place is going to exhibit my photographs next month.
Oh my.
Please. One kiss.
No.
Also, Anna's crazy. Legitimately crazy. You remember Lizzie McGuire and those segments of her inner thoughts represented through that cartoon version of herself?
I have a boyfriend. A cool boyfriend.
Well, Anna has that too. One for her mind and one for her vagina. Respectively called her subconscious and inner goddess. And both of them have more of a personality than Anna herself. They can do backflips. They can do the cha-cha slide. They can even pull out beach chairs and sip margaritas as they judge and mock Anna's smart choices. At some point, both her mind and body turn against her when it comes to Christian and defend all his actions and behaviors like she's brainwashed. There's a family dinner scene that Anna and Kate, who's now dating Christian's brother Elliot, are invited to. When Kate and Christian meet, she's trying to be a good friend and look out for Anna's best interest. But Anna takes offense to that. She gets annoyed because Kate's telling the truth about this guy being too controlling, stalkerish, and not giving Anna enough breathing room. Why? Because it's Christian fucking Grey, the ultimate Gary Sue. All the girls fall for him from a single glare. The guys step back like wet dogs by the sound of his name. If he committed murder, rest assured James will find a way to bail him out. He can do no wrong because he's
50 Shades of fucked up.
He's a jealous, obsessed creep that doesn't respect your boundaries. Whether it be at your job or on vacation, Christian will show up unannounced like an unwarranted fungus and leaves on his own time. He's a narcissist who loves the sound of his own seductive voice and doesn't bother listening to reason. Anna's already taken by his looks, but his words and charisma have this hypnotic spell over her that brings her to any kind of agreement. He constantly showers her with compliments and praise to avoid a difficult conversation and acts as the best distractions when James doesn't want to talk about something. He would rather buy your affection than earn it, and when you try and deny it, he'll make you feel bad for even trying to reject it. But worst of all, he's too controlling, and this is without the BDSM factor. For the most part, I don't criticize what goes on in the sex scenes because everyone should be free to explore their own kinks. You'd like to be called scum and spat on? Awesome. Love having inflated balloons shoved up the old pooper? No judgment here. That's all fine and dandy in the bedroom. Christian is a 24/7 dominant everywhere he goes. He can't turn it off and has no self-awareness to even realize what he's doing. Even before they start officially dating or even thinking about his sex contract, he's already barking orders at her like she's already his. Who's she allowed to see? What should she be driving from now on? When and what she eats? Okay, let me get this out of the way now. What's this obsession with eating and lip biting? Was this a Twilight thing? It's so oddly specific for him to be concerned about. Every time she nibbles on her bottom lip, Christian just becomes this sex-craving monster. But the eating, there are times when he's actually pulling out threats if she doesn't eat. It comes up so often that it pulls me out of the story at times, and this also applies for some of James's sentence descriptions too. The ghost of a smile. What the hell does that mean? Also, how can you even hear smile through a phone call?
I'm sorry, I didn't...
Stay where you are, I'm coming to get you.
What?
But going back to the control problem, his tone never wavers from something that is so dominating. Again, this just might be the way it's written, but the way he speaks to Anna never suggests anything lighthearted. He always sounds angry and stern. On her way to Georgia, Anna gets an email from Christian about turning off her phone and makes a light comment about putting her in the cargo hold, bound and gagged if she doesn't. Now of course, silly me, in the next reply, he confirms it was a joke, but reading up to this point, you can never tell when he's joking. He always sounds serious and Anna just takes it. Ladies, if some guy was suddenly telling you how to live your life every hour of the day and never left your side, would you consider mating with him? Fuck no! You have much more self-respect for yourself, but Anna can't do anything because his beauty is that distracting. Vague reasons come back to justify her obedience and act as weak excuses for why she goes along with his bullshit. He knows how to put on the pressure until she says yes, like what he did to make her agree to be his submissive. Honestly, the only person Anna talks to about her problems with Christian is her mom, and I kid you not, she's probably the second worst character. For someone who's on their 4th marriage, you might be surprised to learn that she gives the absolute worst advice. They are so vague and non-helpful that you just can't believe it. Oh, Anna, men are tricky. They're from a different species. The one that really set me off was when Anna went to Georgia to take a break from Christian, and Mama Steele goes on to say, "Oh, Anna, men are simple creatures and they usually mean what they say, so try and take them literally." Right then and there, Anna begins to reminisce over the very rare times Christian offered her a legit compliment.
You've bewitched me, Anna. I don't want to lose you. I'll miss you too, more than you know.
Bullshit! Where's my palm twitching Christian?
You have no right to be mad.
Yeah, but I am mad. Palm twitchingly mad.
Ow!
Where's the douche that actually says crap like,
You've had 6 orgasms so far and all of them belong to me.
and how can you possibly forget,
I like you so. Reminds you of where I've been and only me.
Now after hearing sexy quotes like those, you're probably quaking in your seats wondering how amazing the sex is, since that's the main selling point. Well, let me ask you this. If I gave 0 shits about these two as people, why the fuck would I give a damn about their sex life? James has done nothing to make these characters likable, and yet I'm expected to care about how they're porking it? It's boring as hell. There could have been several possibilities to play with the idea, even the most basic ones. You could have done chapters with varying levels of teasing, maybe a little roleplay like teacher and student. You could have brought in more submissives or dominance if you're that kinky. Christian has this whole playroom full of toys and items, and I think there were about 4 or 5 scenes throughout the entire series that utilized them. James doesn't take advantage of using more of her environment. Instead, it's always the same dry vanilla sex that could be copy and pasted through each scene. And there are 17 scenes! Full 20-page chapters. Most of them without much difference except for 2, but not because of how good they were. Oh god no. The first is Christian taking Anna's virginity, and instead of taking it slow, he fucks her hard. The scene becomes as rough as it sounds. At one point, James describes Christian ripping right through her, and you can't help but think, poor girl. Her first sexual experience, and it has to be with this rich asshole who takes inspiration from a Stephen King novel? Now you might not know this, but having sex takes a lot of energy, so excuse me for not believing that Anna, a beginner, has that kind of stamina to keep up. There are 2, even 3 sex scenes that happen all in the same hour, and yet Anna can apparently roll with the punches. I guess this is where the fiction comes into play. And I should say something about the tampon scene, since that's what readers bring up the most with this book, but I was disappointed that that's all it was. Christian fucked Anna while on her period. That's it. Then it goes back to the same sex routine, which tells you how pointless these scenes are. They don't develop the romance in any way, because Christian and Anna would just go back to her usual roles and doesn't move the story forward, except for one scene with Anna trading sex for more information about Christian's past. Let me tell you, it wasn't worth it. Because this man is so private, Anna actually has to give up her body to get something out of him, and when he does, it's not enough to justify the drawn out passion we readers have to sit through. This entire book is so long but goes absolutely nowhere. With 20 pages per chapter, only the last 2 pages have anything of value, and you can just cut out the rest. Even the romantic scenes like the helicopter ride or gliding is pointless because it doesn't develop the story or characters. They never change. Finally, let's talk about the BDSM and how James fails to portray it. At one point in the story, Christian talks about how there's a difference between a sadist and a dominant, and his way of consent is in the form of his contract that Anna never signs. While it is true that consent makes the difference, both parties need to be okay with it. The problem with this contract, like the rest of the book, is that it's one-sided. She would have to follow all of his instructions without question, wear what he buys her, go work out with his personal trainer, etc, etc. This contract is explicit and takes up most of a chapter, and it lists all these mandatory rules and instructions. She actually has to change her entire life just to satisfy him, and what does she get in return?
Me.
Obviously, Anna picks out some things that she's not okay with, like punishment or caning, but Christian can be so hard-headed that he's not taking them into consideration. There's no sense of compromise between these two, and James never bothers to write a proper response or scene to discuss these oppositions, resulting in dropping the argument completely and just having Anna come around to it eventually. Near the end of the book, Christian comes to the solution of having Anna not sign the contract, but still follow most of the rules? How is that any different? At that point, it's just a verbal agreement and Anna would literally be submitting to him on her own free will. Christian is really out here trying to earn himself a free sex slave. It would have been fine if there was another sort of dominating the story to compare the practices and show that it's just him personally, but there's no one to rival against this guy. He's the only demonstration for Anna's sex education in the worlds of whips and chains, and it's just wrong. There's verbal abuse, there's emotional strain on Anna, but nothing snaps her out of it until the final chapter where Christian punishes her ass with a belt. So it wasn't his possessive nature, his terrifying habits to control every aspect of her life, and the emotional toll it takes to be with him that told her they might be incompatible. Just the physical act of punishment was enough. From that, it's easy to see that James believes physical abuse is the only kind of abuse that exists. Anything else is just in your head. Wow. And I wish I could say it ends here since Anna walks out on him in the end, but we are still 40 shades away from the true experience. These were just the first 3 weeks. Young love at its finest. Enjoy it while it lasts, because from here on out, it gets much, much darker. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that I forgot this was based on a fanfiction and didn't figure out until halfway through reading 50 Shades Freed. Through each reading session, I will put out a tweet summarizing my thoughts and rants on the chapters I read that night, and this is what I put for the first 3 of Darker. October 25th, 7:20 p.m. It's time to start the new book, and let me tell you, there was absolutely no point. It felt like James wrote the whole trilogy in one go, blindfolded herself, and randomly chose where to split the story for 3 books. It's insane. So without even realizing this was actually the case, I looked at the problems that still existed from the first book and could instantly tell that nothing was improved. The pacing is still garbage. There's this one scene where Christian and Anna decide to eat before sex, so they do a paragraph's worth of grocery shopping, and when they come back, Christian chops one fucking onion and says, "I'm good, let's fuck." What? What's the point? There are a lot of song titles referenced so Anna can deeply read into them. She finds Nelly Furtado's Try in her music library and believes that this is Christian's way of apologizing and wanting to try more. Then you got the more disturbing titles that have no subtlety, like the song they're dancing to in the auction house that's literally called "I've Got You Under My Skin." Everything about this book sucks. Personally, this is the worst one in the trilogy. Enough hatred that actually had me screaming at the pages because I just wanted to stop reading. I was having less fun with this one. The only humor I found was learning about Christian's salary.
The check you gave me for Wanda, you should have it back.
Keep it.
Keep it? It's $24,000.
Anna, I make that kind of money every 15 minutes. Keep it.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I don't buy it. Considering his job is basically making the world a better place, I don't believe it pays that well. Certainly not a job where he can literally make $1 million every 10 hours. He's either smuggling drugs, selling guns, or sucking ass for a living. But at least it gave me a laugh. Everything else was a headache, and a lot of that is due to the one and only Christian fucking Grey. As if he didn't hog all of Anna's spotlight in the last book, this one is focused all on his dark past and why he's the way he is. And the journey is insufferable. His paranoia and jealousy flare up to a degree that makes the statement of Anna belonging to him like a piece of property. He buys all her portraits in Jose's gallery so no one else could have them. He forces her to live with him once word gets out that one of his previous submissives, Leia, is on the loose. And when she wants to go to work at her new job, he tries to keep her from leaving his apartment, and the only compromise is that she takes a bodyguard to keep an eye on her at all times. Isn't that scary? To argue your way out of a guy's house because he's overreacting? From what the book described, this ghost girl Leia attempted to kill herself by slitting her wrist in Christian's apartment while he was out in Georgia from the previous book. She was more of a danger to herself, but Christian treats this whole situation like DEFCON 5 and pulls out the highest level of security for this situation. Not only is he paranoid, but he's become more controlling. In the last book, he said he wouldn't interfere with Anna's professional life, but here he is buying the entire publishing company she's been working for 2 days now, and near the end, fires her creepy boss that instantly opens up a position for her as a temporary editor. Like, was there really no one else for the job? Was SIP suffering this hard that the only lead editor they could actually find was a coffee assistant who barely worked for a week?
We need to print fewer titles. Stick with established authors, focus on our core readership.
Anna, what do you think we should be publishing?
Newer voices, along with your established authors.
He has all her personal information in the folder, her bank account number, her social security, resume, employment records. He won't even let her choose the color of a car he's buying her. A fucking color. And Anna just takes it. Oh my god, it's frustrating to see how controlling and insane Christian's become throughout this book, while it feels like Anna is never moving along with him. Instead, she's going in reverse. James doesn't bother to give Anna any ounce of resistance and just leaves her to submit to all of his requests for the sake of progressing the story. How are we going to get Christian and Anna to move in together if they don't know absolutely nothing about each other?
Well, I guess I can move in if he stops being so obsessive.
How is Anna going to take him when Christian reveals that he's actually a sadist and likes to punish little brown-haired girls because they look like his crack whore mother?
He thinks of his mother while we're together? That's terrible. But he did say that he's working with his therapist on this issue, so maybe we'll be okay.
And after just learning about this disturbing fact, Christian proposes to her out of desperation. And how do you think she responds?
Did he really just ask me to marry him after all that stuff about his mom?
I'm not saying yes, but it's not a no either. Each move made in this book makes Anna more trapped in the relationship. Christian can't function without her love. He can't even have a decent sleep without her presence. And for some forced reason, she makes it her responsibility to fix him. And here's the worst part. It doesn't change him. Any of her efforts to make this man a decent human being doesn't get through. And while Anna is trying to make an effort, Christian continues to be a controlling asshole. I dare you to find one fucking page, where Christian isn't aggressively controlling or suggesting anything sexual. And do you want to know why? Because this highlights another major problem with this series. James doesn't like exploring conflict, especially when it comes to their quote-unquote romance. There's enough evidence to show how wrong they are for each other. We all know this. We all have eyes to read this train wreck that can explode any minute, but it never happens. Let's explore this new sadistic Christian a little further. After revealing his impulse to think of his mom during punishing hour, he tries to make love to Anna. Now, of course, like any sane human, she says no, because who's in the mood after hearing that shit? This would have been the perfect chance to talk it through and get the well-deserved conversation that follows after a creepy reveal like that. Instead, Christian puts the pressure on Anna, telling her not to overthink it, and keeps going until they lock lips. Pretty soon, he pulls out one of his infinite condoms from his pocket and has the balls to say,
"You don't have to do it, Anna. You can always say no."
She was saying no 2 minutes ago, jackass, and you still went for it, because Anna is not allowed to resist. She's just James's puppet to not fight and just take it. There's nothing wrong with fighting in a relationship. Sure, it's ugly, but it can also be healthy in revealing things you might not have known about your partner and force you to confront these issues and move past them. In fact, they can strengthen your relationship, which is what I was expecting out of this story. They are so wrong for each other. How the hell can they possibly end up together? How could they possibly find some middle ground? And I was waiting and waiting and waiting some fucking more, but it never came. James easily had the chance to create one of the most entertaining how did they make it stories, but because she had this impression that fighting is bad and could potentially unravel everything wrong with this romance, she settles to just overlook those issues and let Anna just say yes to everything. But this book needs some sort of conflict, so what does she provide? Jack Hyde, for one. Anna's boss that is just shat on and instantly painted as the bad guy before we even get a chance to fucking know him. And where's that chance located? At the goddamn bar where decent competing guys come to die. It's the same situation as Jose. Exactly the same. After that moment, his personality becomes self-fulfilling to James and suddenly becomes a grumpy asshole to Anna because he didn't get his way. Even tries to feel her up before she kicks him in the balls and runs, leading to his firing. And I'm not annoyed that he didn't get his way with Anna. I'm glad this was one of the rare moments she stood up for herself. I'm still upset that there will never be any good guys for Anna. She can do a lot better than Christian, but as soon as someone decent shows up, James will quickly shove him in a bar and make him drink until they suck. And it's not just the guys, this applies to girls too. Anna's entire conflict is not being able to fulfill Christian's submissive needs, something that his old flame, Mrs. Robinson, and ghost girl Leia can do easily. Her jealousy grows over a woman who turned Christian into a submissive at a young age, and a girl that held her at gunpoint. If these are the people connected to Christian, let him have him! Another reason to leave, but instead tries to prove she's enough for him, and it's just, why? It's not worth it, Anna. Stop! I can't even count on any of the supporting characters to help because they spend the majority of the time trying to convince Anna and the reader that Christian's not a bad guy. He's just a wounded gazelle lost in his past. I don't care if people call him a saint. I don't give a damn if the entire US Army came down to his doorstep to say how much of a national treasure he is. I want to see it. I want him to stop showering Anna with gifts and sex and just speak his mind. There's never a moment where I feel like Anna unconditionally loves him. It's always out of fear. She watches what she says around him. She does things to keep him happy and from lashing out. That's not a lover. That's a fucking hostage. Even when Anna eventually says yes to marriage, no one thinks it's a bad idea. Her stepdad Ray is suddenly on board when she calls Christian her happily ever after. Barf. Kate is convinced after Anna keeps repeating how much she loves him, and Christian's sister Mia comes to her for dating advice with Kate's brother Elliot. And do you know what advice she gives?
You think he's not into you? Well, I mean, you guys just started dating, so just take your time with it. Or maybe just stay friends if the chemistry isn't right.
I can't make this shit up. And I don't even want to bring up Jose. He got so cucked in this book, and they're not even together. Anna invites him to sleep over at Christian's place on the same night he comes back alive from his helicopter crash, and is just giving an answer to his marriage proposal. The poor artist probably didn't get any sleep from their celebration, because we already know how they like to party.
I fuck hard.
But the real trigger for me was James trying to sprinkle some psychological knowledge to us. My ties with mental illness are deep, so you can understand how pissed I got when I had to read what her insufficient Google research brought her to share with the rest of the class. As I said before, Christian submissive Leia was introduced as a trigger for his paranoia because she cut her wrist at his home. I don't know whether I should blame James or Christian for this poor summarization, but under no circumstance would you call any kind of self-harm a typical cry for help. To treat the situation so nonchalantly makes it not a big deal, which shouldn't be the case when dealing with suicide. But that was just a fart compared to Anna's visit with Christian's therapist, Dr. Flynn, and this is a conversation that just further shows how little she gives a damn about the details. First off, take away this man's license. He's been working with Christian for almost 2 years, and the only progress made was when Anna came into his life. How fucking convenient. Yet another reason to keep her around. But why has it taken so long? Well, not just because they've been jumping from different forms of psychology, and only 2 of them seem to relate to the situation, but because they never look at the past. The current plan for them is solution-focused brief therapy, meaning that they know what the end goal is and try to work towards that. It is a real form of therapy, but it typically comes after sessions of completely understanding yourself and knowing how you want to change your life for the better. Christian is such a mysterious man with so much baggage that I believe he was lying in some of those sessions. Dr. Flynn said that they explored his past, but who's to say that anything truthful was really spoken? This is Christian fucking Grey we're talking about. We wouldn't get anything until the final chapters of the last book, which is a letdown because since this is mainly focused on Christian, his past should have been explored here. Instead, James pushes it off and continues to keep the demons close, terrorizing him and the girl he supposedly loves. So, 5 weeks into the relationship, Anna has agreed to marry a manipulative, controlling psychopath who took control over every aspect of her life and has the desire to think of his mother when punishing her. What the fuck, James? So we survived 2 books now. We explored the problems with characters in the first one and got a better look at their dysfunctional relationship in the second. What's wrong with this last one? None. And by that, I mean this is a whole lot of nothing. This final chunk is the longest out of the 3, and you could tell that it struggles to find the focus. At least with the first 2, there was a goal in mind. 50 Shades of Grey focused heavily on meeting the characters and letting this contract tie them together. Darker explored more of Christian's past despite how toxic it was to get through, but this one stopped being a romance and entered the field of action because it doesn't know where to end. In my opinion, this series should have ended on their wedding day. Imagine this, because this book likes to waste everyone's time, it could have dragged enough sex and abuse to reach the wedding day, where somehow Christian and Anna finally began to accept each other. Since Jack Hyde was the last thing we saw in Darker, he could still act as the main antagonist and through his actions would bring this couple together. They would start to talk and understand each other on a whole different level. That wedding is summarized in the first chapter. Not even! James introduced flashbacks now, which of course are pointless and serve no purpose other than to provide filler, like Anna flashing back to when Christian was shaving her pubic hair. And I'll leave it at that. The wedding comes back and forth between their honeymoon in France and just feels broken in places, but because of this missed opportunity, James is working towards something new. What's the next step after marriage?
It seems you're pregnant, Mrs. Grey.
And James doesn't even try to make this fact subtle. About every 2 or 3 chapters, kids are just brought up into the conversation. As you go along with the Jack Hyde stuff and their lives after the honeymoon, it keeps being brought up to the point where she's not even hiding the fact that it's going to happen soon. And when Anna finds out that she's 4 or 5 weeks pregnant, it's not even a surprise. Also, who do you blame for this? Her assistant Hannah, who's been canceling and moving appointments with Dr. Green, or Anna, who's been so busy loving Christian through a chain of email montages that she just forgot? I say neither. I blame the guy who didn't want to practice safety sex because he didn't like the way a condom felt. So for 3 books straight, he's been putting Anna through pills and shots to make sure their sex won't procreate, and if it did, that responsibility will fall all on her shoulders. That's fair, right? What's crazy is that after the trip to Aspen and Anna sees how less controlling and strict he was with his family, her brain just thinks of the craziest notions, like maybe he'll stay like this if he had his own family, which couldn't be farther from the truth. He grew up with Elliot and Mia. More than anyone else, they understand how he acts and can put up with his bullshit. That's a completely different bond than having your own kid, because there's a lot of responsibility on your part. In fact, it would probably make him even more controlling and paranoid, trying to protect his own as he protects Anna, which is completely controlling her life in the first place. Of course, Christian isn't too happy about the news, which leads into the only good thing about this book: arguments. Pretty weird how I'm celebrating the destruction of a marriage, but this is what's been missing since book 1. Now their love is finally being tested. Both partners are being pushed to their boiling points. Even Anna is gaining more confidence, especially when Christian snaps about her pregnancy.
But you are not a kid anymore, Christian. You need to grow the fuck up.
Grow the fuck up, she says. I have been burning my eyes through shitty writing to arrive at this point, and boy, was it satisfying. But alas, all good things must come to an end. Out of nowhere, Christian becomes the ultimate saint by inviting all of her friends and family to a trip to Aspen, gives Anna a great dinner party for her birthday, and even gets her a charm bracelet pointing out all the places they filmed. James somehow thinks that this can suddenly restore faith in the reader that he's becoming a changed man, but one clean wipe isn't enough to cleanse the amount of shit Christian brings to this series. He goes on a riot because she wouldn't change her last name at work. He wanted to surprise her with a wedding gift of changing the company name to Grey Publishing, but before he could get to that part, he's just a monster barging into his office unannounced, saying this to keep management on their toes and wives in their place. He screams at a recovering Layla, who just came to say thank you for all the help he's given to her with therapy and art school, and the blinded anger paints him like a serious jackass. He fights with a nurse when Anna's recovering from Jack's attack. He's acting like he knows better than staff because it's Anna, and the whole scene is just wow. For once in this series, just shut the fuck up. Let the woman do her job, you insecure bag of shit. Of course, Anna doesn't see anything wrong with this. The whole book just completes her entire arc of finally submitting to this man. From the second she said yes to his proposal, I just gave up. If she wants to make love with a guy who's constantly moaning how much he owns her now, so be it. If she wants to pick up his bad habits and get incredibly hostile towards anyone near her husband, it's all her. I enjoyed the arguments that were present in the story, but a little too late now. She's too far deep to ever get out now. Anna was trapped in this love from the very beginning, and as a result, remains nothing more than a weak-willed woman who had 2 kids with this guy. The worst possible ending. But this book isn't about romance anymore. We got an action plot going on, and man, is it insane. You are to believe that this fired editor has the skills and intelligence to pull off some of the stuff that happens in this finale, but let's take it step by step. He started back in darker by sabotaging Christian's wild Charlie Tango ride, which led to that cliffhanger surprise on the last page. And this book starts with a fire in the server room of the Grey household, but that's just a passing mention. The insanity starts with a car chase, and you really need to suspend your disbelief for this one. Christian allows Anna to drive his car, but being Christian, of course it can't go smoothly. His anxiety builds when she steps on the gas too hard or making sharp turns, little stuff like that. But then, they are suddenly followed. Not even panicking or asking to switch, he tells Anna to step on the gas. She reveals that she's never ridden past 50 miles an hour on her Beetle. So you are to believe this girl can suddenly drive 95 miles an hour, bobbing and weaving through lanes like a checkerboard in traffic. She's suddenly Vin Diesel from the Fast and Furious series, and Christian is surprisingly fine with her on the wheel now. But it gets better, because in the middle of all this, they actually get distracted by a bodyguard's name. Yes, this intense high-speed chase is paused to have a discussion about never knowing this guard's first name. And when they finally get away and hide in the parking lot, supposedly it's the right move for car sex. And you're expected to believe that she did all this without any problems. It's balls to the wall insanity. Then nothing happens for a while until Jack breaks into Christian's apartment while Anna and Kate are out drinking. The fact that James didn't even think to make some sort of confrontation happen says how little she knows about creating good action sequences to make her stories less boring. Instead, they arrive at the aftermath, which is pretty good since Christian wanted both of them to stay home. Just think what decent scene we might have gotten if they followed his orders. So I don't understand why he gets angry over this. She's safe. She would have gotten hurt if she did what you asked. You're mad because one of your guards got hurt on the job? A job he was trained for? What are you smoking, my dude? Then Jack's final plan is put into action when he kidnaps Mia and threatens her life over $5 million. Money that Anna is going to take from Christian. This takes place after the fight that happened over her surprise pregnancy, and if it was in any other story, I would applaud it for the drama. It's pretty decent how Christian believes that Anna is taking his money and leaving him to raise his child alone, and Anna just goes along with it to protect them. Wow. If only I didn't hate these characters. So Anna is brought to meet Jack, learning that his assistant Elizabeth has been working for him all this time because of blackmail. This scene isn't as long or victorious as you might think, but what more can you expect? Anna manages to shoot Jack's knee while he backhands her and kicks her right into pregnancy before passing out. Christian arrives at the scene, and the way he finds her is pretty clever and would only work in this relationship because since she knows how much of a stalker he is, she used the phone she was talking to Christian with as a decoy and threw it away for Jack, while her phone was tucked in the duffel bag to track. For once, being a complete stalker actually came in handy. And then, oh my god, are you ready for this? Are you ready for this sick reveal? It's revealed that it was Link behind all this! What? Who's Link, you ask? Well, of course, it's Mrs. Robinson's ex-husband, a man we have never even met in the entire series. And the only connection he had with Christian was his relationship with his wife. And that was it. Meanwhile, Jack and Christian were orphan brothers living in the same foster home in Detroit until Christian was chosen by the Greys. You heard me right. This book had a Meet the Robinsons twist, but the real bad guy being someone we have never even seen. It's amazing how hilariously bad this resolution was. So in the end, Anna and Christian have their son Teddy, and I'm glad they went with a real name. No lie, she was calling him a blip the second half of this book, and I actually thought that might have been the canon name. The story goes farther into the future with Christian having sex with a pregnant Anna. This time she is harboring her new daughter and feels her kick, and I kid you not, Anna actually says, I think she likes sex already. I wish it ended there, but even James is confused on where to end because she keeps just adding more shit to this nightmare scenario. We get an extra chapter on Christian's first Christmas with the Greys. We also revisit that first interview with Anna, but from his perspective. You might think that after this whole journey, we'll start to understand the torment of his past and why am I trying to pull your leg? We all know this man is incapable of change. His final thoughts are wanting to control Anna. Like, holy shit. In 3 months, Anna managed to marry a manipulative psycho and get pregnant with kids he didn't even want. In the end, she became his submissive. In the end, he completely took over her life. She's officially his now. You might be wondering why I barely discuss the movie adaptations, and that's because as a collective, there's not much new added. Since James was closely tied to the projects and making sure that most of her vision was still intact, it was a well shot version of the same boring story. But compared to the books, the movies were a fucking cakewalk. Why? Well, for one, there was more than one writer, and writers who knew how to write a good story. Now let me make this clear, the movies tried. They really tried to turn this into something enjoyable, and managed to make it much better than I anticipated. The cinematography brings out some incredible shots, it introduced that Ellie Goulding song I couldn't stop listening to days after watching. Danny fucking Elfman had something to do with the score. But once I saw how the characters were portrayed, I could already tell this was the superior version. Dakota Johnson not only played the awkward shy girl well, but when it came time to Christian's demands, just the sense that this Anna was going to be a lot more assertive with her choices was a relief. Jamie Dornan played Christian with a lot more suave and a gentle approach, which was already a win compared to the angry playboy from the books. He's more open with Anna.
How did you start doing this?
One of my mother's friends.
He knows how to compromise.
How about once a week, on a night of your choosing, we go on a date? Just like a regular couple.
Again, it's far from perfect since it still brings some crazy scenes from the books, and I would have preferred an entirely different ending, but that's asking for too much. I'm gonna be honest with you all, I hate Christian Grey. He's probably the worst character I have ever read. Mark my words, I will write a story with my version of Christian Grey just for the sole purpose of punching him square in the face, because that's exactly what he deserves. The fact that he held so much power in this trilogy until James decided that that wasn't the case anymore was disgusting. How could people defend this? I just can't see it. I feel so bad for Anna. I don't think I ever given so much sympathy for her character because she definitely deserved better. Her creator acted as the godly puppeteer, making her say things she didn't want to say and do things without a second thought. It was like watching a baby goat forced inside the lion's den and expected to play nice. She stood no chance against this daily millionaire who did what he pleased because there was no control over him, while Anna was suffocated by his immense power. Would it have been better if it stuck with the original names? Maybe. I think that's why the fanfic was better received, because it used familiar characters. Again, I haven't read Twilight and I only seen the movies once, so I don't know how accurate the portrayal was of Edward and Bella, but I could guess that they had a unique relationship that everyone could get behind. I don't think it works when you take away that familiarity but keep the personality. I can see Edward getting angry or being short-tempered with Bella since it might have something to do with his background as a vampire, but Christian? I know jack shit about him, but thanks to this trilogy, all I see is this manipulative man who treats his girls with no respect. This series will try to tell you different, but read beyond the words and just get a good perspective of the situation, because no matter how you look at it, it's abuse in disguise. So what if he's constantly making sure that her mind, body, and soul understands that she belongs to him now? At least he didn't hit her. Who cares that she has to live in fear of his anger and make sure her life sucks so his could be great? At least he didn't fucking hit her. Psychological and emotional abuse are a thing, James, and I can't even imagine the countless lives you have damaged with this release. By now, people understand the true nature of the story, but it never hurts for an extra reminder. Don't treat this as a romance. You're better off reading it as a comedy for bad writing, or a horror book following a girl walking blindly into a toxic and abusive relationship. And if you've been in a relationship similar to this, you'd be warned to stay away because it might trigger some bad memories. It's that awful. I'm secretly hoping this video gets big enough to get noticed by E.L. James herself and enter this Twitter war. That way, I can ask her a question that popped up several times during this read. Are you an Anna or a Christian? Because I started off believing that she was writing from Anna's perspective, but I know better now. She's not an Anna. She's Christian fucking Grey.